Good day and welcome to the September 25th Ask the Expert session. My name is Kim. I'm the moderator for today's session. Today's session is about falls prevention. Falls are a serious health issue, but are often preventable. The Fraser Heart Falls and Injury Prevention team will present information and practical strategies to reduce your risk of falling. This interactive discussion will cover the 4 pillars of fall prevention to keep you on your feet. Our guest speaker today is Ronda Fields. She is a physiotherapist with Fraser Health Authority's Injury Prevention and Assessment team, working with the Falls Prevention Mobile Clinic and the Healthy Bones Clinic. Prior to this role, she worked for several years as a home health physiotherapist in FHA. Her 30-year career has included working in 3 countries in virtually every level of care, from residential care to ICU. Her outside interests include travel, renovations, volunteer work, reading, and spending time with family. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Ronda. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. I'm just going to share my screen. Before I get too far, I do want to say that I think it's a little bit misleading to call me the expert, because I think the people in the room are the experts that are living with their various conditions and so on. I'm not an expert in stroke by all means. Although I've worked in almost every area, I've not really spent a ton of time working with stroke and stroke survivors, but lately I've been spending a lot of time working with fall prevention. So I'm just the talking head. I'm not the expert. So there we go. But yes, I also want to give our acknowledgement. So Fraser Health provides services on the traditional and ancestral and unceded territories of the Coast Salish, the Nklamax, and also there's 6 Métis chartered communities within our land, our territories. So I just want to say that I personally live on the lands of the Kakite First Nation, who are one of the First Nations that do not have any land. But I would like to say that I respect and affirm the rights and titles of all of the Indigenous peoples of Canada, and I do greatly respect our Indigenous elders, both past, present, and future. So having said that, poll. I'm going to keep people on their toes by asking questions. So the question I have is, in the room, how many people have had a fall in the last year? Oh, I can't see the progress of this one.
Okay, for the next poll, I might have had to have clicked a button to see the progress. I'll let you know. 44% said yes, and 55% said no, 56%.
Well, good for you that haven't fallen. That's great news. I would say that you're actually, this group is a little bit better than average. So when we talk about falls and we talk about what the definition of a fall is, it sometimes surprises people. So the definition of a fall is actually any time you land on a lower surface without meaning to, whether or not you're injured. So that doesn't mean you have to land on the ground. It could mean that you tipped backwards into a chair, or you were getting up out of the bed and you sat down accidentally. All of those things are actually considered technically to be a fall, even though you're not injured. So then the question is, having heard that definition, does it change your answer? So if you take that definition into account, whether or not you're injured, did you land on a lower surface without meaning to? Have you had a fall in the last year? Oh, wow. So that kind of changed the number a little bit, didn't it? So now we've gone from, what was it, 46 before to 77%. So if you learn nothing today else, then you've learned that the definition of a fall is a little bit wider than what many people recommend or realize. So Why do we talk about falls? Well, like Kim said, falls are very important. They're the leading cause of injury among Canadians. 1 in 3 seniors falls each year. And I think the scarier statistic is that if you've actually fallen and had to go for any kind of medical assistance or a checkup or whatever after you've had a fall, you actually have a 70% chance of falling again, which is in the next year, which is a lot. And the problem is that falls cause a lot of injuries, such as hip fractures, head injuries, etc. And a lot of people who end up having to leave their home and move to another living environment, like a long-term care facility, are there because they started to fall and couldn't care for themselves. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that a lot of falls are actually preventable. So really, that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is how can we prevent falls? So when we talk about how to prevent falls, we have to understand what puts people at risk of having a fall. And so there are lots of different kinds of risks, and we put them into 4 basic categories. So the first risk is what we call biologic risks. So these are things that are related to the human body. So that might be something like, it might be something like age, it might be something like weakness, loss of balance, there's certain diseases, having had a stroke. All of those things can increase your risk of having a fall. Then we talk about what we call the social or economic risk factors. And these are risk factors that are more to do with our living situation, the type of housing that people are in, the financial situation, their ability to communicate. Sometimes if people can't understand or read signs or warnings, they might have a greater risk of falling. If they live in rental housing where they have no ability to put some of the safety things in place like railings, they might have a higher risk of falling. If they have financial constraints that mean they can't buy a walker or take the medication they need or whatever, all of those things are considered socioeconomic risk factors. The environmental risk factors, these are the easy ones. These are the things like the slippery floor, the clutter, the wires, the ice, the snow, the rain, anything in the environment that might cause you to have a fall, stairs with no railings, those sorts of things. And then the last category is the one that we call the behavioral category. And these are related to the choices that people make. So some people choose not to do any physical activity. And so when you don't do any physical activity, you become weaker, your balance decreases. So that's a behavioral choice. Sometimes people make choices for footwear that might not be safe for them. Or my mother is a perfect example of someone who needs to use a walker or a walking aid, but chooses not to because she is proud and doesn't want to use a walking aid. That's a choice that she's making. And much as I have tried for years to change her mind, these are choices that people make, and they have the right to make their own decisions. So, next poll question. So, true or false? Do stroke survivors have a higher risk of having a fall than people who have not had a stroke? Yeah, most of you got that one right. Yes, stroke survivors do have a higher risk of having a fall. So the question would be, well, why is that? Well, there's a lot of things that happen to some people having had a stroke. And of course, everybody's experience is different with having had a stroke. And some people have very significant physical lasting things that happen after the stroke. Some people, their physical status doesn't change a lot, but some of their behavior might change. But there's a lot of risk factors that specifically people that have had stroke are likely to have that increase their risk of falling. So a lot of people after having stroke will have leg weakness, and clearly that is going to be a risk factor. Many people will have some spasticity, or their balance might not be as good as it was, or their coordination, they might miss some coordination. Many people after having had a stroke will have changes in their ability to understand the world and sensation. A lot of people have a neglect where they kind of miss one side of their body and don't aren't able to recognize dangers as well on that side. There are lots of vision changes that can happen with strokes. Many people after strokes have dizziness. And then, like I said, some people after a stroke, they might be more impulsive, or they might have, there's a lot of changes, any of which could increase the risk of having a fall. So I believe the stat is that stroke survivors are twice as likely to fall as non-stroke survivors. So the question is, what do we do about it? How can we prevent falls? So when we look at fall prevention, we talk about the 4 pillars of fall prevention. So the first thing is vision. We really strongly recommend that all seniors have their eyes checked by an eye doctor every year. And so when we look at common vision problems, sorry, I didn't do my slide very well. There's a lot of common vision problems. So the ones on the left, cataracts, macular degeneration. Cataracts tend to make vision blurry. Macular degeneration tends to have kind of like reverse tunnel vision, where there's like a spot in the center where you can't see and you can only see out of the outside edges, the periphery. Glaucoma is the opposite, where you can see the inside, but you can't necessarily see the outside. Diabetic retinopathy can be very, it's very difficult to tell exactly how diabetic retinopathy is going to change your vision, because there's lots of different parts that end up missing, but it's not a regular pattern. A lot of people after a stroke have the visual field loss, the homonymous hemianopsia, where you lose one side of your vision. So you really can't see anything to that side. And some people after stroke have like double vision as well, or blurred vision. So these are sorts of things that will increase people's risk of having a fall. So the first thing, like we said, is get your eyes checked and make sure that your vision is corrected as much as able. So, make sure that you have appropriate glasses or contacts or whatever it is that you're using. If you're wearing glasses, make sure they're clean. And it sounds really simple, but when I was in home health, I would frequently go in to see people who, I don't know how they even navigated around their homes, because their glasses were so caked in stuff that they couldn't even hardly see out of them. And it really takes a few seconds to clean your glasses. So making sure they're clean is important. Having appropriate lighting is really important. So we want to make sure that there's enough light that people can see properly, but we also don't want to have a lot of glare, because glare itself can be a problem. So there's kind of a happy medium between too much light and too little light. So making sure that you have appropriate lighting, especially if you're getting up in the night. So a lot of times people have falls in the night when they're going to the bathroom or whatever. So we really do recommend that you have either sensor lights that come on automatically when it's dark, or there are some that are movement activated. So when you move, the light will come on. But having an appropriately lit pathway to get to the bathroom in the night is really important. So then we talk about multifocal lenses. So multifocal lenses are things like bifocals, trifocals, progressives. And the similarity with all of these different types of lenses is that when you're looking through one part of the lens, it's for example, distance, and then another part of the lens might be for reading. But sometimes if you're looking at a distance through the reading part, or you're looking to read through the distance part, it causes changes in your depth perception. So you can't actually tell how near or how far you are from something. And so it can put people at a fairly significant risk of having a fall if they're having difficulty. Now, having said that, lots of people have had multifocal lenses for years and years, and they don't have a problem with them. And if you don't have a problem with them, that's great. But if you find that you are having difficulty seeing stairs, for example, or curbs is a great example of where people start to have difficulty with multifocal lenses, because they tend to look down at the stair and then they are looking through their reading part instead of their distance part. And if you're starting to have difficulty like that, it may be safer for you to have 2 pairs of glasses, one for distance and one for reading. But again, everybody's individual. It's very hard for us to say, you know, this is what people need to do. A lot of people with various eye conditions do need to use eye drops. It is important to use them correctly. For example, I sometimes hear people say, well, I do my eye drops in the bathroom at night, and then I can't get back to my bed because my vision's really blurry. Well, perhaps it might be a better idea for you to do your eye drops in your bedroom before you lay down and not move around for 15 minutes after your eye drops, so that you aren't at risk of having a fall. So being aware of how the eye drops should be used and making sure you're using them correctly is important. And then we also talk about modifying the environment. So sometimes it's important to make things a little bit more visible. So for example, I'm going to show you a couple of slides. So this is a bedroom where everything is pretty much white. The walls are white, the floor is white, the bed is white. And here's the same bedroom with one very small change. It just has a dark blanket on the end of the bed. Which would you say is easier to see? Most people would say that the one on the right with the dark blanket makes the bed a little bit easier to see. And that's just because all we've done is add a little bit of simple contrast. But if your contrast vision isn't great, it can be very difficult to pick up the various shades of white. And that might mean that when you're walking into the bedroom, you might walk into the bed. Or when you're going to sit down on the bed, you might actually miss the bed and end up on the floor. If it's not easily visible, it might be harder to actually navigate around. So just by putting a dark blanket on the bed makes it a lot easier to see and a lot safer. So a similar example would be the 2 staircases. So basically it's the same staircase. All they've done is they've painted the handrail black and they've put a black band on each of the steps. And most people, again, find that the one on the left with a little bit of extra contrast makes it a little bit easier to see. And that way you know where the railing is if you need it suddenly. And it also means that you can see where the step ends so that you can step high enough to manage the stairs. So those are just some examples of how vision is important. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of stroke specific detail, but I would say that it is important that you have your eyes checked every year. The next thing we talk about is medications. And we also recommend that everybody get a medication review done every year. So certainly in BC, and again, I don't have knowledge of how it works in other provinces necessarily, but in BC, if you're on 5 or more medications, you are eligible to get a prescription review. I believe it's every 6 months, but it's at least every year. And so you can talk to your local pharmacist and they should be able to sit down with you and go through all of your medications, and they can help you determine if any of the medications that you have side effects that we're going to talk about in a minute that can increase your risk of falling. They'll help you to determine if any of your medications don't work well together, because sometimes people are taking 2 things that actually don't work well together. And it's important to make sure that you're aware of the effects of all of your medication. So when we talk about medication effects, there are a number of things that medications can cause that can increase risk of falling. So I want you to think about the medications you're on. Do any of the medications that you're on make you drowsy? Drowsiness is a risk factor for falling. How about dizziness? Some medications cause dizziness. Some medications can actually decrease people's coordination. And again, if your coordination isn't very good, you're more likely to fall. Lots of people take medication to decrease their blood pressure because they have high blood pressure. We don't want to have high blood pressure. But at the same time, if your blood pressure is too low, that's actually a significant fall risk. And not only do some people have blood pressure that's too low all of the time, we sometimes see people that have, normal to high blood pressure when they're resting or wandering around. But then when they go to stand up, it drops again. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Again, many people have diabetes and they take medication to decrease their blood sugar. Again, if your blood sugar is too low, it's going to put people at a higher risk of having a fall. And some medications can actually cause vision disturbances. So again, about 80% of the information that we use to maintain our balance comes from our vision, and that's a lot. So if your vision is impaired, then you're at a higher risk of having a fall, unless you have developed all of your other systems that take care of vision. You know, I tell people that there's lots of people out there that are 100% blind and have been forever, and they have great balance, but that's because they've learned to use the other systems that we generally don't use if we're used to being able to see. There are a couple of other effects that medications can have that aren't going to actually increase your risk of having a fall, but they will increase your risk of having an injury if you fall. So for example, many people take blood thinners and they need them, but if you fall and you're on blood thinners, then you're at a higher risk of bleeding and having, you know, significantly more injury. Also, some of the medications that people take can actually affect the bones and make the bones weaker, which puts people at a higher risk of having a fracture. So all of these things are significant for people who are at risk of having falls. So again, ask your pharmacist to do a medication review, and also tell them all the supplements you take, because sometimes the supplements don't work well with the medications or whatever. When we talk about this, I said briefly that sometimes when people stand up, their blood pressure will drop. Many people have never had their blood pressure taken standing up. So if you have a blood pressure monitor at home, one thing you can do is to take your blood pressure after you've been sitting and resting for a few minutes. We don't want it like as soon as you sit down, but after you've been resting for a few minutes, reading a book or watching TV or whatever, take your blood pressure. Then stand up and take it immediately. When you stand up, we actually expect your blood pressure to either go up or stay the same. But for about 30% of people, their blood pressure actually drops when they stand up significantly. And if your blood pressure drops, then what it means is that you're not getting the blood supply to your brain. And it can cause people to feel dizzy, woozy, off, unwell, weak. You know, sometimes they can't even they can't describe it. They just don't feel right. And sometimes people will fall as a result of that. So, you know, we hear stories about people that were getting up out of bed because they needed to rush to the bathroom. They got halfway down the hall and they ended up on the floor and they're like, I don't know what happened. I was just on my way to the bathroom. But it is sometimes a result of the fact that their blood pressure drops. So if your blood pressure actually does drop when you get up, then it's really important if you're in bed, moving your arms and legs in bed is useful. If you are sitting, you can't see my feet, but if you do some really brisk ankle pumps up and down, up and down. So I usually keep the toes on the ground, but just lift the heels up and down for about 15 to 30 seconds before you get up. That actually gets your blood circulating so that when you stand up, there is less risk of having a fall. And then we talk a little bit about calcium and vitamin D. And again, I'm a physio. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not the person who can tell you, how much you need to take and so on and so forth. But I can tell you that the standard recommendation for people in the 50 plus age group, so that's me and many other people probably that are in this thing, is 1,200 milligrams a day of calcium and 8 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D. Calcium is really important for building strong bones, but in order to work, your body needs the vitamin D because the vitamin D helps the calcium to be absorbed. So if you're just taking the calcium with no vitamin D, then you're not getting the benefit of the calcium as much. And when we talk about calcium, the best way to get calcium is through your diet. You cannot get too much calcium through your diet. So, obviously dairy products and cheese and so on are good sources of calcium. Broccoli is a good source of calcium. There are certain nuts and legumes that have calcium in them if you're a vegetarian. But there, it is important to make sure that you're getting enough calcium through your diet. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to get the daily recommendation of vitamin D through your diet. Vitamin D is also called the sunshine vitamin. It is the vitamin that we get from the sun. The unfortunate thing is that we live in Canada, and maybe for part of the year in the summer we get enough sun in some places. But the problem is that when we go out into the sun, we usually have sunscreen, hats, long sleeves, all of those things, which again decrease our absorption of vitamin D. And then certainly in BC, we go for usually like 8 months of the year where it's cloudy and rainy. And we certainly don't get enough vitamin D. So again, it's really difficult to get enough vitamin D through your diet. And in Canada, it's difficult even to get it through the sun. So most of the recommendations in Canada, and it's not the same if you live, in places that it's sunnier, but most of the recommendations say that people over the age of 50 should take a vitamin D supplement. So again, this is a conversation that you really need to have with your doctor and your pharmacist. I know that in BC, again, that's where I work and that's where I live. So this is what I know. We have what we call HealthLink BC, which is 811. Now, I do know that 811 has services throughout the country, but the services do vary by province. So I don't know in your province, when you call 811, if you only speak to a nurse or if you have the opportunity to speak to a dietitian, a pharmacist, or an exercise professional. In BC, if you call 811, you can speak to any of these people. They'll put you into like a triage where they ask you, who do you want to speak to, or what's your concern? And then they'll hook you up with the professional that you need to speak to. It's a non-emergency service. It's totally free. For us in BC, the dietitians and the exercise professionals work during the day, and the pharmacists actually are there overnight. So it's just really helpful because if you have questions about, well, am I getting enough calcium in my diet, or should I take a vitamin D supplement, or are my medications causing extra risk or whatever, then it gives you a place where you can call for help. Okay. So now we usually go to my favorite category as a physio, which is the exercise category. And the challenge with doing a webinar format is A, I can't see if anybody's asleep, and B, I can't see you to actually ask you to do the exercises, which is what we would normally do when we give presentations, is we actually make people get up, because I'm not a fan of sitting for long periods of time. When we talk about the physical activity guidelines, this is the old version of the guidelines, but I like it because it's concise. So the guidelines haven't changed. It's just the icon that has changed. But this icon shows that, the guidelines state that all seniors should be getting a minimum of 150 minutes per week. And that's of what they call aerobic activity. So that's activity that gets you breathing a little bit faster, gets your heart working a little bit more. So that would be things like riding a stationary bike, swimming, walking, all of those kinds of things. 150 minutes a week, but in blocks of 10 minutes or more. So that 150 minutes a week sounds pretty scary. It's basically 20 to 30 minutes a day when you break it down. And it's, like I said, blocks of 10 minutes or more. So if you're doing a 10-minute walk in the morning and a 10-minute walk in the afternoon, or a 15-minute walk in the afternoon, you're right on track. As long as you're walking, quickly enough that you feel like you're getting a little bit of breathing more quickly. And we don't want people exercising to the point of exhaustion, but at the same time, if you're lollygagging, it's probably not doing that much for you. Balancing exercises. All seniors should be balancing every day. Doing balancing exercises is very important. For strength training, in order to maintain your strength, it's important to do a minimum of twice a week of what we call resistance exercises. So that's exercises that make your muscles work. And the resistance could be either your body weight, it could be a soup can, it could be a stretchy band, it could be any number of things, but some kind of resistance. And then the little green icon that says health benefits says that these are basically the minimum recommendations. And if you do more, you're going to get more benefit out of it. So anybody want to take a guess as to how many Canadians actually, older adults, meet these guidelines? Not many. 11%. That's not very good. But I understand in the States it's 9%. Australia, I believe it's 17%. So they're way ahead of us. But this is the newer format of the same guidelines. And if you look at this format, you'll notice it does talk about the same sort of things, but it adds a couple things that weren't in there. It adds the piece that we should all be doing several hours of light physical activities, including standing, and limiting sedentary time, so sitting, to 8 hours or less. And I often have people say, oh, there's no way I sit for 8 hours. And I'll say, okay, well, I want you to think how much time you spend eating your meals, watching television, using the computer, driving, reading, all of those things. And it actually adds up pretty quickly. You can't see right now, but I actually don't have a chair in my office. I'm at a standing desk. So when I'm moving around all over the place, it's because I can't sit. It's important to try and add extra standing or extra steps in where you can. So if you're watching television, could you get up during the commercial break and walk around, or stand behind the couch, or go to the bathroom, or go get a glass of water, or do something like that? They also recommend no longer than 3 hours of what they call recreational screen time. So for people like me that spend hours a day staring at the computer for work, after work, I should be spending no more than 3 hours of time either on my phone or my computer or my watching television or whatever. And it is really important to not sit for long periods of time. Really, we should be getting up at least every half hour. And then the other thing that's in the new guidelines is sleep. Sleep is so important. We should all be getting a minimum of 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep every night. And going to bed and waking up at consistent times. So that's a little bit of the information about the activity guidelines. It's all based on evidence, and evidence says basically that exercise alone is as important as all the other pieces that we do in fall prevention put together. But when we talk about exercise for fall prevention, it's really balancing and strengthening that are the most important things. So activities that challenge your balance, it actually has to challenge it or it's not going to have a benefit. So things like Tai Chi or balancing classes, and something even as simple as, when you're standing at the kitchen counter, standing with your feet right close together, or standing on one leg, or standing with one foot in front of the other, anything that challenges your balance, those sorts of things are really important. And then strength training, again, you need to have some type of resistance, whether it's a soup can or a dumbbell or just your body weight. It's 3 times a week to improve strength, twice a week to maintain, minimum. Why? Because balance and strength training can decrease your risk of falling by up to 50%. That's huge, huge. There's no medication that's going to decrease your risk of falling by up to 50%. The challenge is that walking doesn't actually improve balance or strength. And that's really sad, because a lot of people say, oh, I exercise all the time, I'm always walking. And that's great. I want people to walk. Absolutely. Like I said, 150 minutes a week. Because walking is good for your heart, for your lungs, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your brain, your bones, your mood, all of those things. But unfortunately, walking alone doesn't really improve strength or balance unless you're, hiking on uneven ground and those sorts of things, which most people probably aren't. So some tips for increasing activity. First of all, my favorite thing, and the thing I tell people, dozens of times a day is that when you go to sit, it's really important to sit very slowly, because when I see people in the clinic and when I go into rooms where there's groups of older adults, I frequently see people who don't lower themselves into the chair. They just plop into the chairs. And that actually, first of all, has potential risks involved with injuring their back. But if you can actually slowly, gradually sit and control that movement, you're going to get your leg muscles working. Now, the challenge is if you have bad knees, you might need to start this activity from a higher surface, like slowly sitting at the edge of the bed or slowly sitting on a chair with a folded blanket or a towel, something to raise it up. But that, if there's nothing else you do today that you learn from this, try and make an effort when you go to sit down at the table or sit down at wherever it is, try and sit slowly. And if you're doing it, when I say slowly, I say count to 10 if you can, but you should feel your leg muscles working at the end of that. But again, if you have sore knees, you might need to raise the seat up. Sometimes it's easier for people, rather than planning to do a 10-minute walk, to just add extra steps somehow into their routine. So when you're going someplace, could you park further away and actually walk in and walk out? Or instead of taking, like if you're going to visit your friend on the next street, instead of going directly there, could you go around the block to go there instead of just going next door? Trying to find another way to get extra steps in. Like I said, while you're waiting for the toaster, the coffee maker, the kettle, the microwave, whatever it is, could you do some moving on the spot? Could you do some balancing? Could you do something while you're actually waiting? Could you actually have that telephone call with somebody while you're actually moving around and walking instead of sitting? So find ways that you can build the activity into your routine somehow. Again, when we talk about walking and so on, we want to try and aim for 10 minutes at a time. Another thing I tell people is a great time to practice balancing is while you're brushing your teeth. Your dentist wants you to brush for 2 minutes, so 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. A lot of people have electric toothbrushes that have a timer that kind of goes bzz, bzz at the end of the 30 seconds. If you're able to stand on one leg, many people can't, but if you can practice balancing maybe with your feet right close together or one slightly forward, or find a way that a position that challenges your balance, but is still safe. Practice that while you're doing your toothbrushing, and then you've got your balancing done for the day. There are lots of really great exercise classes out there. So when I was looking into sort of stroke specific exercise classes, we have the TIME program and the FAME program. Lots of people do some outpatient rehab type classes. Any type of classes like that can help to improve your strength and your balance. Having a friend who you can exercise with is super important also. So I tell the story about my mother who, like I said, she's high risk of having a fall, and I've been trying for years to get her to do exercises, and I haven't had a lot of success. And so a couple of years ago, I went out to visit her, and I met her friend, and her friend was saying, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" So I told her, and her friend was like, "Oh, I'd be really interested in learning some exercises to help prevent falls." And I'm like, absolutely, here we go. So we started doing the exercises that I'd been trying to do with my mother. And then she and my mother started calling each other 3 times a week and putting their phones on speakerphone and actually doing the exercises at the same time on the telephone with each other. And then after they'd done their exercises, they would sit down and have a bit of a yarn and, just talk about things. And then my parents live in Ontario in the summertime. That's my background, is where they are. And then they come out here in the winter. So even when my mother's in BC and Eleanor's in Ontario, they're still having this conversation 3 times a week and doing their exercises. And that was way better than me saying to my mother, you need to do your exercise, because she wasn't going to do it for me, but she would do it with Eleanor. And sometimes people use an activity tracker. Now there's high-tech activity trackers like the Apple Watch or the, Fitbits or whatever, but not all trackers need to be high-tech. A pen and paper and a calendar are absolutely trackers. You can check off every day that you do your balancing exercises on the calendar, or you can mark down how long you walked for on the calendar. And that's a way of tracking your activity. Now, normally, like I said, I would get people to practice. Unfortunately, I can't see people. So I would ask that if it's safe for you and you are comfortable to do it, you can either do this in sitting, or you could stand behind your chair or hold on to the desk or the table or whatever it is, and just practice lifting your toes one at a time off the ground, lifting your foot, the toes of one foot at a time, not one toe at a time. Although lifting one toe at a time is great too, it's just harder. So putting the weight through one leg and lifting the toes of the other foot up, this actually works the muscles on the front of your shin. And a lot of times after people have had a stroke, they have a foot drop and they lose the ability to lift the toes up. Or certainly it becomes very, very weak. And so even if it's weak, we still want you to practice trying to get the message from your brain to your foot, because it's kind of like the highway has been shut down for construction and messages or cars are getting through, but it's a lot slower. So sometimes just by practicing asking your muscles to do the work, we're helping to rebuild those pathways, and eventually the traffic will speed up, the message will get there more efficiently. But if you don't ever work on getting the message from your brain to your foot, then it gets weaker. So like I said, this can be done in sitting, it can also be done in standing if it's safe, and we always want people doing things like this at the kitchen counter. The second part to this is to go up on tiptoes. Again, this is something that can be done in sitting, where you're just sitting and lifting your heels off the ground, or if you have a counter, a desk or something you can hold on to, going up onto your toes. Because these activities are designed to work on strength and balance, we really want people to use as much hand support as they need for safety. But again, it needs to be a little bit challenging, because if there's no challenge, you're not going to get anything out of it. Walking on the spot is an activity that people can often do, not everybody, but again, if it's safe, but it can also be done in sitting, where you're just practicing lifting one leg and then the other leg. And if you are waiting for the kettle to boil or the toaster to pop, could you be walking on the spot while you're waiting? The idea is to gradually increase the amount of time that you spend doing the walking in preparation for doing more activity outdoors. This exercise is the one thing you cannot do in sitting. This is bringing one leg behind you. So it's what we call hip extension. So that's an important activity, because when we walk, we end up with one foot behind. And if you are always sitting and not ever doing this activity, the hip muscles at the front of the hip get very, very tight, and you lose the ability to put the leg behind you. And then it means that when you walk, you're taking very small steps, because you can't take that big step because there's no flexibility in your hip muscles. So if it's safe for people to do this, again, holding on to a counter and bringing one foot behind them can be an important activity. And then, like I said, my absolute favorite is the slow sitting. So again, the idea is to have, if you need a walker, have it in front of you. If you need a chair with armrests, that's great, have it in front of you. But the idea is to use your hands as little as possible. So to begin with, you may need to have one hand lightly resting on the arm of the chair, one hand on your leg. Eventually, you might be able to get to the point where you have both hands on your legs and you're slowly lowering yourself down. But again, the goal is to use your leg muscles to slow your speed, not your arms. And then, of course, practicing standing back up again is super important too. Functionally, this is the most important activity that people can do because we need to be able to get on and off toilets and in and out of cars and in and out of chairs. And if we're not practicing as an exercise, sitting and standing, then it gets harder and harder. So, time for the next poll question, now that everybody's asleep. So what type of exercise is most important for preventing falls? Is it walking, balance exercises, strength training, B and C, or all of the above? That's where I figure out if everybody was awake. The challenge with doing presentations like this is it's really hard to keep people awake. Oh, good. 56%. Well, actually, only 32% got the right answer, which is B and C. Strength and balance training is most important for preventing falls. So walking, while it is really, really important, it doesn't actually do much for fall prevention. So actually the correct answer is B and C. So 32% of you got that. But walking, like I said, is important for so many other reasons that that's important too. Okay, a little bit about home safety. So more than 50% of falls actually happen at home. And sometimes we need to take a look at our home environment to see if there's risks at home. So for example, I think that there's a fairly obvious, difference between the room on the left and the room on the right. I would say some days mine looks more like the room on the left, some days more like one on the right. It really depends. But you can imagine that if there's a lot of clutter and stuff in the way, it puts people at a much higher risk of tripping over something, of not being able to catch themselves if they do lose their balance because there's nothing to grab onto, etc. So while I don't think it's necessarily feasible that everybody's place looks like the one on the right, there's probably a happy medium somewhere between these two where we can strive to be so that we have clear pathways and clear surfaces just in case we need to grab onto something. So some of the other considerations for making the home safer, things like removing clutter and tripping hazards, that includes things like cords. Sometimes we go into people's homes and we see they've got extension cords running all over the place. And that can be a problem. So making sure that they are either taped down or strung around the edges of the room rather than through the middle of the room. One thing that many of us do that's maybe not our safest idea is we pile things at the bottom of the stairs for when we're going up because we don't want to go up right away. And again, then the bottom of the stairs gets all cluttered, which puts people at risk when they're going up or down the stairs. That might be a good opportunity to get a few extra steps by going to take something up rather than leaving it at the bottom. Non-slip mats and throw rugs. So throw rugs are historically a fairly significant risk for having a fall because often people have rugs that slip or the edges curl and they slide, or sometimes they're just a little bit higher than the regular floor, so people will catch their toes on them. It's difficult to get people to get rid of their throw rugs, and ideally in a perfect world we would prefer people didn't have them. But if you can't part with your throw rug, you could tape the edges down using secure tape. Or when I went to visit my parents in July, I spent a little bit of time with my very strong two-sided tape going around and taping all of the rugs down. And my father's, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, Nothing. He never did say anything to me about it. So A, he either didn't notice, or B, he just didn't bother, because I've been asking him to do this for years and he hasn't done it. So I'm like, look, I'm taking matters into my own hands. But using non-slip mats and securing your rugs is super important. It's also really important to have railings on the stairs. And I was really surprised by how many people have stairs with no rails. But railings on the stairs are very important. And it's also really helpful to have proper grab bars in the shower. And when we talk about proper grab bars, we often are a little bit leery of the suction cup ones, because they don't always stick. Sometimes they have an indicator that says it's stuck, but then when you pull on it, it's not stuck. And in order for them to stick correctly, it has to be a really clean, really smooth surface. So they're great on glass, but they're not so great on tiles, for example, because if the suction cup covers the grout line, it may not stick. So if you can't install a permanent grab bar, and when you install it, it's important to have someone who actually can install it safely into the studs, et cetera, then it is really important to make sure, if you have to use a suction cup grab bar, that you test it every single time you get into the shower before you need it. Like, just actually give it a test every time. There's lots of other equipment that people can use in their bathroom, like raised toilet seats and toilet safety frames, which are bars that go around the toilets. Tub transfer benches where you actually sit to get into the tub instead of trying to step over the tub, all kinds of different pieces of equipment. I'm getting, oh my gosh, it's already almost 11 o'clock. Okay. So keeping things that you use frequently within easy reach are important, using good lighting and night lights, making sure that you take your time, don't be in a rush, and safe footwear and not using floppy clothing is really important. So, safe shoes have either laces or Velcro, closed heels, low heels. Flip-flops are not really a great idea for fall prevention, and neither are these. There's lots of different walking aids out there. If you need a walking aid, these are some of the things you may see. Hemi walkers are quite common, at least in the early stages with strokes. Canes, some people use walking poles, four-wheel walkers, two-wheel walkers. If you're using a walking aid, if it's a cane, make sure you're using it on the opposite side of your weak leg. Remember what we call the heaven and hell rule. When you're going upstairs or up a curb, the good foot goes up first and the bad foot goes down first, and the cane is considered to be part of the bad foot. Make sure your aid is the correct height. It should be about wrist height when your arm is hanging down by your side. Make sure to stay close to your walker and stand up tall, because a lot of times I see people that are bent over their walker and their walker's way too far ahead of them. Part of the reason that can happen is if it's too high, then when they're trying to use it, their arm is too bent and their shoulders are up around their ears and it's really uncomfortable. So they put it further out so that they can have a better arm position, but then it's further away. If you're using a walker, make sure you lock the brakes before you get up and down, and don't pull on it to get you up. And make sure, again, there's space in your home for using your walking aid. Some people can use walking poles for balance and stability. There's lots and lots of different pieces of equipment that can be helpful for bath safety. And again, talk to somebody about it. Hip protectors are great. Lifelines, most people know about them. I think we'll skip the last poll. And then just the key points are, falls are serious, but often preventable. Make sure the home is safe. Learn about the resources in your community. Get your medications tested and your eyes tested every year. Move more, sit less, balance and strength training. If you can decrease any of your risk factors, you're going to decrease the risk of having a fall. And the overarching thing is your independence is important. So I know we were late. So we had a couple of polls. What were the most effective ways to prevent falls? Was it being careful, balance and strength training, removing hazards, or staying home? Yes, balance and strength training. Being careful actually means that people are avoiding activities that challenge their balance usually.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, I'm just going to jump in here and say thank you so much for your presentation. I wish we had more time to finish, but we do have a few questions in the Q&A. I wonder if we could just take a moment to briefly answer these questions. We have a few minutes left here, not too many questions. The first one, Rhonda, comes, does the Fraser Health follow Canada standards of stroke best practice in falls prevention? And if you are not sure of any of these answers, we could just follow up later.
I'm aware of the stroke best practices, and I know that a lot of my colleagues are also aware of them. I am one very tiny piece of Fraser Health. There's thousands of people in Fraser Health, and I can't speak to what other people do, but I do know that my colleagues who work in stroke have brought them to my attention, and so I'm presuming that they are aware of them.
Thank you. And again, if you need to follow up on any of these questions, we can do it through email. But what are the false stats of Fraser Health? Do you have stats?
So we actually could get the stats, and I'd have to look it up. We have a database, a provincial database, where you can actually by each health authority, you can find out how many people have gone to a hospital for a fall, how many people have died as a result of falls, but they're hospitalization and mortality stats. It's very difficult to get numbers on how many people fall because so many people don't actually think they've had a fall if they haven't injured themselves, and they don't report.
They might not report. That makes sense. How do I get up after a fall on my own without any stable surface to hold on to help me get back up?
That's tricky. So we would generally recommend that you crawl over to a stable surface because it's going to be very difficult to get up without doing it. There are some great videos by the Saskatoon Fire Department called Remembering When. They have a Remembering When program that shows how to get up from a fall and how to help somebody else up from a fall. But again, it's really important to have that stable surface.
Hi, we have two more questions, Rhonda. Ataxia post-stroke may not have, I might not have a warning before a fall because of ataxia. And can you comment on it and how to deal with ataxia symptoms to avoid falls?
Yeah, that's a very tricky situation because ataxia means that you have a loss of your coordination. And of course, it's going to definitely impact your falls risk. And if it's coming on, if you're having a sudden episode of it and you aren't expecting it, then certainly you're at risk. So, you may need to have a conversation with your medical provider to see if they've got any recommendations for how, because I can't see people, I can't understand how the ataxia is affecting them, but often people may be better off having a walking aid that they use just in case they have something to hold on to, or that's a difficult question to ask without being able to see and interact.
Thank you, Rhonda. So follow up with your medical provider as well. We did get an extra question added in, so we do have two more. You mentioned a lot of exercise programs for people who walk. What about a stroke survivor that just can't walk?
So there are absolutely lots of different chair exercise programs. And so I think some of the ones that I think FAME may have some sitting exercises. We have a program here called Get Up and Go, which starts with sitting exercises. So that's definitely a really important starting point. I would say that if you're able to stand up, even for your transfers and stuff, it is really important also to do as much as you're able to do in standing, because while it is really important to exercise in sitting if that's what you're able to do, it is also important to work on the standing piece, because really balance in standing is hard to achieve through sitting.
Thank you. And there are a lot of cracks. How do you prevent falls? I guess this was the idea of your entire presentation. Yeah, I think cracks in the sidewalk and things like that.
What I do is we have an app on our phone for the city called See-Click Fix, and I take a picture of it and I send it to the city, and they actually come and they spray painted orange, which at least makes it more visible. So, the high contrast spray paint can help, and trying to get it fixed. But the other thing is, again, just being aware. If you know that you have difficulty lifting the toes of one foot, making sure that when you are at that crack, you're really working to lift that leg, so you're not dragging your toe, or some people need to wear an ankle foot orthosis or a brace to help with preventing foot drag and so on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rhonda, for your presentation. A reminder to everybody that's attended today that you will receive a handout of the presentation, as well as a link to the video, which will be available for viewing in about 1 week. So Rhonda, thank you very much for your time today and for your expertise and for spending it with us. We appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Have a good day.